She came into his life when it was falling apart. She cared for his sick wife, brought tea, stayed late. They called her a blessing. But blessings don't come with doses. Subscribe, some stories are whispered, not told. Evelyn had always blended into the background of other people's lives. She was the type of woman who remembered birthdays but never had her own party, who sent thoughtful notes and brought homemade muffins to staff meetings but rarely shared anything personal. At 46, she lived alone in a modest apartment with beige curtains and a kitchen arranged like a medical tray, precise, spotless, silent. Her world revolved around systems, small kindnesses, and the quiet satisfaction of being useful. She worked as a nurse practitioner in the same private clinic as Dr. Tom Bradley. Tom was in his mid-50s, a respected surgeon with a calm demeanour and a reputation for saving lives with unshakable hands. His wife, Martha, was a different kind of presence, vibrant, magnetic. She had once run a successful interior design firm, then scaled back to focus on charity work and hosting. Martha was known for her impeccable taste, her laughter, and the way she could make any room feel warmer just by entering it. Together, Tom and Martha had become something of a golden couple in their suburban Seattle neighborhood. Over the years, Evelyn drifted into their lives like rain through a crack in the roof, slow, persistent, unnoticed at first. She offered to cover extra shifts for Tom. She complimented Martha's garden, then started bringing organic seeds from local markets. When Martha fell ill with a minor flu one spring, Evelyn dropped off soups, teas, and magazines just in case. She was never imposing, just available. Soon she became a regular presence at family dinners and holiday parties. She would arrive early, help in the kitchen, refill wine glasses. She made herself useful, invisible in the way only truly observant people can be. And when everyone left, she stayed behind to help with dishes, humming softly, her eyes flicking toward the wine Tom forgot to finish. It was around that time Martha began to feel off. At first, it was nothing specific, just a nagging tiredness. Then came the migraines, then tingling in her fingertips, a strange weakness that came and went. The first doctor suggested dehydration, the second a hormone imbalance. The third raised the possibility of early-onset autoimmune disorder. But nothing added up. Every test returned clean. It was frustrating, unsettling. Evelyn didn't offer diagnoses. She offered warmth. She arrived each evening with a different herbal tea in a glass jar tied with ribbon. She said the blends were calming, good for circulation, good for rest. Martha drank them every night. Tom appreciated the gesture. He told Evelyn she was a blessing, that not many friends would go to such lengths. Evelyn only smiled, her hands folded neatly on her lap. She had a gift for silence that felt comforting, never heavy. She listened more than she spoke, and she watched everything. Martha's symptoms grew worse. Some mornings, she woke up disoriented, unsure whether it was Wednesday or Saturday. She stopped driving. Then, slowly, she stopped going out altogether. Evelyn began to arrive earlier in the day, started preparing lunch, then dinner. She kept a change of clothes in the guest room. Once, she caught her reflection in the hall mirror and realized her toothbrush now shared a cup with Tom's. No one questioned it, not even Tom. He was exhausted, pulled in every direction between the clinic and home. Martha's decline was breaking him. He leaned on Evelyn more than he realized. She never asked him to, never suggested he needed her. She simply made herself indispensable. Sometimes when Tom came home late, she handed him a glass of wine. They sat in the quiet together, the house dim and too still. Evelyn would glance at the half-empty glass he forgot on the counter before heading to bed. She always noticed what others left behind. Each morning, the sun rose on a new version of their life. One where Martha stayed in bed longer. One where Evelyn knew the sound of every door, every drawer, every cough from the second floor. She wasn't part of their family. Not yet. Autumn deepened everything. The colours outside grew richer, while the light inside the house seemed to dim. Martha no longer left home. The once regular trips to the farmer's market, the long walks with her rescue dog, even the occasional garden pruning, all stopped. She began complaining of stomach cramps, occasional confusion, and sudden waves of vertigo. She had trouble remembering where she put things. Once she forgot how to use the microwave. Tom tried everything. He adjusted her diet, eliminated gluten, refined sugar, even dairy. He consulted specialists, neurologists, endocrinologists, rare disease experts. The tests were exhaustive, the appointments endless. Nothing conclusive ever came back. No virus, no tumour, no genetic markers, just unexplained inflammation, fatigue, and memory loss. Evelyn's presence became constant. She arrived with notes neatly folded in her cardigan pocket, remedies, herb charts, alternate theories. She brought small jars with handwritten labels: milk thistle, marshmallow root, valerian. She claimed these supported digestion, soothed the nervous system, balanced the gut. She called it support from within. She said it with warmth and modest conviction, the way someone might speak of an old family tradition. To Tom, she became something between a nurse and a companion. She organised appointments, prepared meals that matched Martha's new restrictions, cleaned the guest linens without being asked. She knew which vitamins to avoid if Martha had taken painkillers, which teas didn't interfere with anti-nausea meds. She documented symptoms better than some of the nurses Tom supervised. But Evelyn was more than helpful. She was steady, her presence never shifted. While the house grew more fragile, she became its anchor. She wore soft colours, moss greens, muted blues, beige with hints of lilac. Her hair was always pinned neatly, her shoes soundless on the floor. She never raised her voice. Her silence felt curated, like a museum's stillness, intentional, preserved. Then came the collapse in the kitchen. Martha was pouring tea when she slumped forward, striking the corner of the counter as she fell. Tom found her moments later, unconscious, a faint line of blood at her temple. The paramedics arrived quickly, and Evelyn stood in the hallway, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. When the tests came back, they showed nothing new. No stroke, no head trauma, no explanation. Martha was sent home within 24 hours. Tom, ever the man of logic, began to doubt himself. He paced the bedroom that night, murmuring about gaps, about possibilities he might have missed. He looked through case studies, old journals, anything that might explain it. Evelyn sat quietly in the den, waiting. When he came downstairs, exhausted and wordless, she poured him a glass of red wine and set it gently beside him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Martha's decline became impossible to ignore. Her skin grew dull, ashen in certain lights. The veins in her hands stood out starkly. Her movements were slow, her coordination faltering. Once she tried to write a grocery list and stared blankly at the pen in her hand. On another evening, she turned to Tom and asked him where Evelyn lived, even though Evelyn had been living in their guest room for weeks. Sometimes Martha mumbled phrases that didn't make sense. She claimed she couldn't feel her voice, that her words didn't belong to her. She wept without clear reason. She forgot names. Then, as quickly as the episode began, she'd go quiet again, drifting into sleep that seemed heavier each night. Evelyn observed all of it. She kept a notebook now, documenting every shift. She adjusted Martha's teas accordingly, changed the ratios of ingredients. She said the body needed balance. Her tone was never clinical, never cold. She delivered her knowledge like a caretaker offering comfort. Tom cried for the first time in front of her the night Martha stared past him for over an hour, eyes blank, mouth slightly open, her fingers twitching against the blanket. Evelyn sat beside him, hands folded in her lap, eyes downcast. When he looked up at her, red-eyed and shaken, she rose without a word and brought him another glass of wine. With the wine, everything became softer. The grief blurred. So did the lines. By Christmas, Martha was confined entirely to her bed. The woman who once hosted elaborate dinners and rearranged furniture on a whim now struggled to hold a spoon. Her voice had grown faint, her breath shallow. The room was dim most of the time, the curtains drawn to soften the light that seemed to sting her eyes. Her world had shrunk to a few square feet, pillows, folded blankets, the small table with her medications and lukewarm tea. Evelyn became the centre of that world. She arrived early each morning, her routine quiet and precise. She spoon-fed Martha broth and soft fruits, wiped her mouth with warm cloths, changed linens with practiced ease. She kept a small notebook tucked into her cardigan pocket and filled it with entries. Martha's pulse, her temperature, her reactions to each new herbal blend. She documented everything in neat, steady handwriting, as if keeping a record not only of the illness but of the slow unravelling of a life. Sometimes Evelyn hummed while she worked, old lullabies, forgotten hymns, nameless melodies. Other times she sat silently by the bedside, knitting or reading with her head bowed. She rarely used her phone. Time passed differently in that room. The ticking of the clock was muted by layers of wool and sorrow. Tom, unable to bear the sight of his wife's deterioration, distanced himself more with each passing day. He spent longer hours at the clinic, volunteered for surgeries he normally would have deferred. When he was home, he moved like a guest, quiet, careful, burdened by helplessness. He often lingered outside the bedroom door, listening, then turning away before going in. The woman in that bed no longer resembled the partner he had known for decades, but that didn't mean he loved her any less. If anything, the distance he created was a shield against the unbearable truth that he was losing the one person who had grounded him. Martha had been his anchor. She was the one who packed his lunches when he forgot to eat, who decorated their house every fall with fresh pumpkins and candles, who teased him out of his stress with gentle sarcasm and a hand on his shoulder. She made the cold parts of life livable. He had loved her fiercely and without condition, even in silence, even now. Watching her vanish piece by piece broke something in him that he didn't know how to name. Martha, in her moments of lucidity, tried to hold on to fragments of herself. One afternoon, she asked Evelyn for a pen and paper. Her hand trembled violently as she attempted to write. After several minutes, she gave up, the paper untouched except for a faint accidental stroke of ink. She stared at the page as if it betrayed her, then closed her eyes. Evelyn didn't speak. She folded the paper and placed it in the drawer, then brushed Martha's hair away from her forehead. The days grew shorter. The room smelled faintly of eucalyptus and lavender. On Christmas Eve, Evelyn arrived with a small linen pouch, hand-sewn, filled with dried lavender and chamomile. She said it would help Martha sleep better, that it soothed the nerves and calmed the breath. She placed it gently on the pillow beside her. That night, Martha fell asleep early. Her breathing slowed until it became almost imperceptible. At dawn, she was gone. The official cause was cardiac arrest, compounded by systemic exhaustion and an unexplained inflammatory disorder that no specialist had been able to fully diagnose. The body had simply stopped. Tom stood beside the bed, silent and still, as the morning light filtered in. He didn't cry. Not then. There was only the sound of the sheets being pulled back, the soft rustle of Evelyn closing the window, and the weight of something final settling into the air. 5 months after Martha's death, they were married. There was no grand celebration, no gathering of distant relatives or exchange of vows beneath flowered arches. It happened quietly, with a modest ceremony at the county courthouse and a dinner afterward at a local French restaurant where Tom had once taken Martha on anniversaries. Evelyn wore pale grey and kept her hair pulled back in a soft chignon. Tom looked older than he had before, thinner but not broken. He appeared relieved, grateful even to no longer be grieving alone. The transition had felt natural to those around them. Evelyn had already been there, had seen everything. She had taken care of Martha with a devotion that looked almost holy. And in the weeks that followed Martha's death, she remained a constant. She cooked meals, handled condolence letters, reorganized the linen closet. She made no demands, never hinted at her feelings. She simply stayed. Tom, in his quiet way, accepted her presence. He wasn't a man of dramatics. He mourned inwardly, turned his attention back to the clinic, and buried his sorrow in work. Evelyn became the one who reminded him to eat, who picked him up when he fell asleep at his desk, who replaced the flickering light bulbs and restocked his favourite tea without being asked. Her presence was seamless, almost inevitable. In the spring, she moved in permanently. She brought few belongings, simple clothing, a collection of herbal jars, a small radio she kept on low volume in the mornings. She asked to redecorate the kitchen and replaced the worn oak table with a sleeker glass one. She purchased a new dinnerware set, white with delicate blue trim, and boxed up the old one. She repainted the guest bathroom and removed the floral towels Martha had picked out years ago. There were no objections. Tom watched her quietly reshape the house they had once built together and said nothing. Laughter returned, though quieter, more contained. Evelyn had a gentle sense of humour. the kind that worked in soft pauses and raised brows. The house, once heavy with absence, began to feel occupied again. The air warmed, the windows opened, Evelyn planted herbs in the backyard, but the past lingered in strange places. Sometimes Tom would come home and swear he smelled lavender, faint but distinct, though the linen sachets had been thrown away months ago. He found a drinking glass in the sink coated in a cloudy residue, though he couldn't remember using it. Once he thought he saw a figure behind the cracked door of the upstairs bedroom, a quick blur of motion, gone the moment he turned. He began to feel watched, though he couldn't say by what. The house seemed to hold its breath in certain rooms, especially the bedroom, especially at night. One afternoon, while searching for tax records in the attic, he came across an old wooden box. Inside was a stack of Martha's stationery, her favourite pen, and a single sheet of paper with faint, jagged handwriting. The ink was faded. The letters shook on the page. But he recognised the loops and angles. It was hers. The note was barely legible, a scattering of phrases. Some words were broken mid-sentence, but a few stood out clearly. Tea, sick, don't trust her. Tom didn't sleep that night. The next day, while Evelyn was at the grocery store, he drove to the clinic. She had always kept a few personal items there, a drawer in the nurse's office, a locked cabinet for her herbal blends. With the key she had once handed him in passing, he opened the bottom drawer and found a leather-bound notebook. Inside were dated entries, lists of symptoms, times, dosages, names, not just Martha's, other names, other women, all written in Evelyn's precise, careful hand. Tom said nothing. He didn't confront Evelyn. He didn't go to the police. He didn't even ask her about the notebook. He simply carried on, quiet and observant, as if nothing had changed. But something had shifted in the air between them. Subtle, cold, deliberate. 2 weeks after he found the notebook, Tom hired a private caregiver. Her name was Lily. She was 24, a nursing student taking a gap year, with large eyes and a clumsy, sweet demeanour. He introduced her to Evelyn with a calm explanation that his workload had increased, that he might need to travel, and that it would be good to have someone younger around to assist with errands and housekeeping. Evelyn smiled politely. She asked a few practical questions, where Lily would sleep, what her schedule would be, but she did not protest. Still, there was unease in her eyes. She observed Lily closely during those first few days, like noting the way she moved through the house, the way she chopped vegetables too quickly, how she dropped a plate on her second morning and apologised too much. Evelyn relaxed. Lily was inexperienced, harmless, childlike. She posed no real threat. Weeks passed. Evelyn resumed her usual rhythm. She spent mornings in the garden, trimmed the herb planters, baked bread. She noticed Lily watching her sometimes from the kitchen window, but the gaze was soft, almost admiring. Occasionally, Lily brewed tea for both of them, mild blends, nothing unusual. Evelyn accepted them without question. Then the symptoms began. It started with a dull ache in her abdomen, something she dismissed as indigestion. Then came a persistent fatigue that sleep couldn't fix. Her hands began to tingle. Her fingertips felt numb by evening. She grew nauseated after meals. On the 5th day, she woke up dizzy, her balance unsteady. By the end of the week, she could barely keep food down. She scheduled an appointment with a specialist. The blood work came back quickly. Her liver enzymes were elevated, dangerously so. There was early-stage damage, inflammation, signs of toxic stress. The specialist mentioned a rare accumulation of compounds, substances that shouldn't have been in her system. He asked if she'd recently taken any experimental medications, any herbs in high doses. Evelyn said no. She left the clinic with shaking hands. The drive home felt endless. Her mind raced through explanations, old supplements, cross-contamination, something she'd eaten. Nothing made sense. When she returned home, Lily was in the kitchen boiling water. The smell of dried flowers lingered in the air, chamomile perhaps, or something stronger. Evelyn watched from the doorway, silent. Lily's movements were smoother now, more deliberate. She reached for a small jar from the cabinet, measured out the contents with surprising precision, and stirred them gently into the pot. There was no clumsiness, no hesitation. The performance was over. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt true fear. It was not dramatic or loud. It settled into her spine like cold water. It occurred to her, slowly and with dreadful clarity, that she was not in control, that she had never been. that someone had been watching, waiting, learning. She turned away without a word, her breath caught in her throat. The kitchen behind her smelled like her own past, sweet, fragrant, fatal. Evelyn tried to speak with Tom. She followed him from room to room in silence before mustering the courage to begin. Her voice trembled, carefully measured, layered with just enough vulnerability to suggest confusion rather than guilt. She said it must have been an accident, a reaction, an unfortunate chain of events. She said she never meant for anyone to get hurt. She insisted it couldn't be what it looked like, that everything had simply happened on its own, tragically, inevitably. Tom didn't respond. He listened, or at least appeared to. His face remained expressionless. His hands were still. When she paused, waiting for reassurance, for a softening of his jaw, for any sign that he still saw her as the woman who had once comforted him in his grief, he only looked at her. A long, quiet stare, empty of warmth. He said one sentence, nothing more. She stood frozen in the hallway as he turned away, disappearing down the stairs without another word. The door closed behind him with a sound that was neither loud nor soft, but final. Evelyn remained where she was, a cold pressure building behind her eyes, a trembling in her chest she could not control. She felt the floor beneath her feet, but it didn't feel stable. She didn't call the doctor. The irony clung too thickly. She told herself it would pass, that it was exhaustion, stress, perhaps a delayed reaction to something she'd eaten. But the pain grew sharper. It moved through her body like smoke, slow and invasive. Her hands trembled, her vision blurred, her sense of balance warped, as if the floor dipped beneath her at random intervals. Her skin grew pale and clammy. At night the walls breathed. Shadows moved when nothing stirred. She stopped eating. Everything tasted wrong. Water made her nauseous. Her sleep fractured into short, fevered intervals. She couldn't tell if it was 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon. Time bent around her like heat. Each night brought hallucinations. Once she saw Martha standing at the foot of the bed, expressionless, holding the paper she had tried to write on before she died. Another night she heard whispers beneath the floorboards, her own name repeated in a voice she didn't recognize. The worst were the sounds that had no origin, doors closing where no one was, footsteps that didn't match her own. The house shrank. Her world narrowed to the bedroom, then to the bed. She no longer walked without bracing herself against walls. Her body betrayed her in increments. Then one morning, she woke to silence. The pain had dulled to a steady throb. Her throat burned, her fingers numb. The air in the room felt too still. She turned her head slowly toward the nightstand. There, on the wooden surface beside her bed, was a cup, white porcelain with a faint blue rim, her cup. Steam rose gently from its surface. The scent was familiar, soft, floral, deceptively benign. Chamomile. She didn't scream, she didn't move. She lay there staring at it, paralyzed not by illness but by recognition. The final gesture, the full circle. There was no need for words. The cup said everything.